Hello and welcome to Bust and Beyond with your host Robin Hayhurst. In this podcast, Robin will introduce guests that have known failure and want to share their story about how they got through it and what happened next. This will make you learn how to see things from a new perspective and avoid making the same mistakes. Please welcome Robin Hayhurst.
Welcome to Bust and Beyond podcast, and I'm
Thanks very much.
Lucky to be here with Ralph, who I spotted a post on LinkedIn, wasn't it?
That's right, yeah.
Which was about failure.
Yeah.
Strange. It's my subject. So hello, Ralph. Can you tell us a bit about you and, what your background is?
Yeah, absolutely. I will stop me if I drone on too long on the background. So career-wise, how old am I now? 34. So 12 odd years ago, 13 years ago, I left university and went into, with no better ideas really, went into the insurance industry. Spent nearly a decade there before realizing that I actually did want more out of life. I think that was the kind of main thing that I learned from that experience, was the need for some sort of purpose. And without really knowing what that was going to be, I left to nothing, to take what ended up being about 5 months out. And during that time, I traveled to Costa Rica with a friend of mine and discovered this amazing tea called yerba mate. So after coming back to the UK and really kind of having fallen in love with this plant and what it could do as a tea, for me personally, I decided to make a business out of it. And it kind of hit me in the face. It was a matter of, if I don't at least give this a go, I'm going to spend the rest of my life kicking myself. So without really planning it, without looking for anything, it sort of definitely came upon me, this circumstance to start a business. And that was, or has been to date, the steepest learning curve, the hardest thing, the most worthwhile thing that I have ever done. And now, kind of looking back, it having not gone at all the way I'd planned it going, and having clung on to it because it felt like such a dead certainty. I've never been a fatalistic person at all. I'm not a religious or particularly spiritual person, or I certainly wasn't in the past. That's an interesting one that's certainly changed. It felt at the beginning like fate, that it was going to succeed, because how could it not, that I wanted it to so much. It was a very weird one. I'd never really experienced that feeling with anything before. And having spoken to a lot of other founders, I think, people share to a greater or lesser degree, certainly in the first business, at least a little bit of that, especially when it's something that's kind of so tied up with purpose and having a positive impact, for example, on people or planet or both. So yeah, the biggest takeaway for me was actually the letting go, and the freedom and the energy that I got from that, to actually be able to go, oh my God, look how much I've learned and look what I can do, and taking the bits that I did achieve as achievements and not losing those in the fog of the feeling of having failed.
Yeah, I think, failure is so important in your journey. And I'll tell you a little story. Today, I applied to a kind of federation or group that represents the industry to be a member. And I got turned down. I got turned down because my company went bust 7 years ago.
Right.
And I just thought, God, they obviously don't understand. They don't actually run their own businesses. Yeah. They don't understand it's part of the journey. And particularly in my industry, which is construction, the failure rate is so high. Yeah. You're excluding such a big majority of the industry. And the people that are now doing well are ones that have failed in the past. And lots of my clients, what they've done is they've set up on themselves. Yeah. They've gone for it. They've put everything into it. They've failed, and they've gone, right, okay, I've got the gumption to go and do it again, but I need some help. And they realise that. And I think that's really, really big. So, I noticed you from your LinkedIn post. Yeah. It just popped up in my feed. I must say, I thought it was a very honest post. It's the kind of thing that makes you stick out, because it was, it wasn't a kind of a sob story. It was,
thank you.
This is where I am. Yeah. And by the way, anyone got any job opportunities? Maybe I'll go back to insurance for the moment or something. And it really stuck out. And that's why I contacted you.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. The response to that was extraordinary. I think the main part of the response to that as well was, I know that there's a lot of stuff out there at the moment about failure and how good failure is. And I think from memory, what I'd said at the beginning of that post was, yes, I know a lot of people are putting a lot of stuff about how great failure is out there. And I very much kind of see the intellectual side of that. But I guess what I wanted to share was, in the midst of it, how brutal that is, and not to forget that, And I think people got the message that I certainly wasn't warning anyone away from choosing to take a risk, not at all. But actually, I think people appreciated, especially people who had taken similar risks or are in the middle of taking them, that someone was actually honest about the brutal reality of that. Because no one is. Certainly no one was to me. In fact, that's not true. There was one person who was to me at the beginning, who was kind of instrumental. And it was one of the conversations that stuck so much in my head, was this guy who was saying, look, he had just failed kind of in quite awful way, because he'd gotten so far with it, and he'd just reached that inflection point where he realized, after a long time of kind of plateauing, that it wasn't going to be able to start the kind of next phase of growth. And, among other things, that their competitor had sort of beat them to it. So he was telling me, the most valuable thing I think he told me was that, look, really know that you will probably, like, statistically, you are likely to fail at this. And I was like, yeah, I know. As you do, you kind of have to be a bit reckless like that and be like, yeah, whatever, yeah, no, sure. And he said, yes, statistically, you are most likely to fail at this. And actually, the people who succeed, certainly in specifics of drinks business or anything food and drink related, he was saying, often it's the case that people fail at the first one because they focus too much on brand and not enough on distribution. Then they'll try again at some point in the future. The second one will be all about distribution and reaction to their previous experience, and then not enough brand. And then maybe on the third one, it's where you get that blend exactly right, and then you make it work. That really, really stuck out for me, because my experience ended up being basically exactly that, all about brand and not enough distribution, first go. So I'm hoping that my next go, which I'm definitely planning on taking, I absolutely want to keep starting businesses, until I get not just one, but several successes, actually. And that's been a big change in my thinking about it as well.
The thing about failure is the emotional toll it takes on you. I think people don't often appreciate that or realize, that's what it's all about. So the emotional toll is really difficult.
Huge.
It was for me really, really difficult.
Absolutely brutal.
I felt I'd let people down, people close to me, other people. I thought I'd be seen as a failure. And some people did. I mean, there's always that element,
Yeah, same.
And also, we're not very good at celebrating success in this country.
Exactly. We're really not, actually, are we?
No. We tend to look at people and go, excuse my language, but rich bastard, well, and you don't know.
And you wonder why we're sort of starting to fall behind a bit on the global stage. Yeah. And the places that do celebrate that more are among the fastest growing economies on the planet.
Yeah. And we definitely don't. And I think it's a big problem.
I agree.
I can see that. But like I said, the emotional turmoil, I was ill. It was that bad and it affected me. But am I so much stronger for it now?
Yeah.
And it is difficult. Same as what I'm doing now. It's trying to get out there and be noticed.
Yeah.
There's a lot of noise out there now. Social media is fantastic and amazing. It's also terrible, so it's really good for you and really bad for you.
Yeah.
And I think that, that's something that's difficult, and just to be noticed, to get people go, I really recognize this. You've got to kind of be everywhere and have the right message.
Yeah.
And I think that's important. So what kind of was the final straw? What made you go, right, okay?
There was a big combination of things is really what it felt like at the time. But the final straw, I think the final straw was that I got to a stage at the very end when I wasn't really doing any work because I wasn't able to. There wasn't kind of enough cash in the bank of the business to do anything significant. And it had been like that for a few weeks, really. I sort of came up against the wall of going like, what am I doing? I can't do anything. And I'm sort of too afraid to move now. And I realized how paralyzed I was. I felt, by that point, it really was like you said, you were ill. I think I was definitely ill. It had reached depression, full-blown depression. And I did, the whole, how it affected and spidered out into the rest of how I viewed my life as well, was like a cancer. So much of it was tied up with the feeling of being stuck and with that feeling of fear of being unable to move, like paralyzed from action, was, I think, in hindsight, it was all about what would people think, I heard an interesting, funny enough, another podcast where a guy, I can't remember the name of the company or the name of the guy, actually. All I remember was he was talking about that being the main thing that stopped him in his first venture. It was just such a huge fear about everyone's going to think I'm this and that, or everybody thinks this and that. And some people do, you're right. But actually, I think the reality has been the people that do think ill are the people, really the only people who pathologically cannot take risks themselves.
I totally get that.
Yeah.
I remember walking down my local town, and I was walking down the high street. It wasn't that I've gone bust. I'm literally head down. Didn't want to see anyone. Didn't want anyone to, because I thought someone was going to come and go at me.
Yeah.
And then a guy that I knew who's really, really helpful to me, and unfortunately passed away a few years ago, but he said to me, I've spoken to a few people that have been, lost some money when you went down, and they all know you did everything you could.
Yeah.
So there were a few people that just liked to stick in the knife, and some of the things that were being said were really, really unkind. But I think they were in a minority.
Yeah, definitely.
But it was so difficult, and I can never explain to someone, it's a bit like going out and getting drunk and doing something really stupid, like running down the high street naked, and just thinking, my God, it was that embarrassing.
Yeah.
And it kind of doesn't, and people don't go enough into how much it affects people, but also how much guts it has to get back up and do it again. And,
exactly.
I think that was one of the things. I remember when I first went out on LinkedIn, because LinkedIn wasn't really a big part of my life when I was running my business. Went out on LinkedIn. I thought, I'm going to do a couple of posts and someone's going to find me, and they're going to, nothing, absolutely nothing. Because most people, they've moved on. It's only me.
Yeah.
I just hadn't moved on, but you still feel like that.
I mean, I remember, I think the absolute worst part in terms of the people responding to me, I had two of my very, very close friends who just couldn't really understand ever, why I had done it. And I think, I mean, is there any point in me wondering why they think that? That's the big question. I think that if anyone is out there that's, from my personal experience, that was really going to personally hold you responsible in any kind of negative way and go, you were an irresponsible person. It's kind of, for me, it was because I think those people always held that fundamental view, Everybody else, funny enough, it was kind of all came apart with a very firm line in my life between really the second that I left what I used to do and started embracing this entire spectrum. It wasn't just about work, it was every aspect of my life, which was I can do more. I can go out and create things. And yes, that involves taking huge risks, huge personal risks, and doing scary things and stepping way out of my comfort zone. All of the people that came with that mentality have been extremely supportive. Nearly everything and everyone that came before have been sort of more nervous than I have been at virtually every stage of the process, apart from the actual everything going down, And even then, frankly, I would almost say that they probably were more nervous than me.
But I think part of that, and it's a really odd thing to say, but I so believe this, people become very jealous.
Yeah.
What you're doing.
I think.
Yeah. Now, only because of what they see. And the thing that jealousy doesn't have to have any foundations. It doesn't have to be true. So someone could look at me and go, you're better looking than I am. They could be stunning, but they could think that I was better looking, and they could be jealous of that. There's no foundation to it, but because they think it, there's a jealousy factor. And I often say that to I've got two girls, and I often say to them, when people are not kind to them, it's often because they're jealous. And they say, well, they've got to be jealous of me. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be real. It can be anything. People looking inward to our family company thought we were completely loaded, loads of money. The reason we were going bust is we were moving our money somewhere else, and we were just taking the money out and doing that. It was exactly the opposite. We actually put money into the business. So, well,
that's it. In terms for pound, I've got my biggest ticket investor, I think, has been £25,000. And my own personal investment is almost 4 times that, of my actual own cash that I put into the business. And people, I think, forget that often as well. And I think the people I'm thinking about forget that most of all because of how I think they would use the word cavalier I now appear to be. Of course, it's not. I've been through it. I was the complete opposite of cavalier. I cared probably in this first experience a lot more than I should have done. And I was too attached for too long to it going down.
And I think people look at that from the outside and see something completely different. So going back to this group that won't let me join, we went down for 2.8, but they haven't bothered realizing that 2 million of that was our own money. It was directors' loans that we'd put into the company.
Right.
Of the 800,000, we'd managed to get the person that hadn't paid us to pay the subcontractor direct a lot of it. So actually, it was most probably 150, 200 grand,
right, exactly.
Which is still a lot of money when you owe it to people. And, I
of course.
feel that you want to pay people, but, you can't. That's why you have limited liability.
Yeah.
People just get the wrong end of the story, and they think that they see the headline figure, like the headlines in the paper, and it's not correct.
Yeah.
It's not right. So, and the trouble is in kind of organising for these subcontractors and suppliers to get paid directly, they didn't declare it to the liquidator. So the liquidator doesn't change their figures, so the figures are still there. So, this is what happens. But yeah, people really are strange. I had some really, really good friends. I had one guy, because I had a couple of people turn up at the drive and who weren't happy. Don't blame them, but, they felt that aggression would work, which it doesn't really work on me. And when this guy found out, he said, right, give me your phone number. He said, you phone me. I'll have the whole village around there on your drive if any problems like that. Just that kind of support and people having a word with me and people just making the effort to take me out places. And some friends took me up to Norfolk for a weekend. I remember that weekend being a turning point.
Yeah.
I managed to relax. I managed to realise that there was life beyond it.
That's what it all comes down to, actually, is that bit of perspective.
And you really do realise who your friends are.
Yeah.
Because other people I knew said, well, I remember going for a job. So it wasn't a job. It was just, I was interested in housing associations and there was the possibility of getting in as a non-exec director. And I went for an interview. And someone I know said to me, why are you doing that? I'm not going to employ you. You've just gone bust.
Yeah.
You just proved you can't run a company. Well, I got the job.
Yeah, quite right.
Quite
right too.
Yeah. And someone else I was working with at the time, because I managed to get out of that, run another company we had. I do a little bit with that. Someone else said, you're more valuable now. You know more now. You're more valuable and you've got that purpose. So that's brilliant. So anyway, going back to your post, because the exciting thing about your post is you got an invite.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, I did. So, it started out with a call. I had loads of discussions afterwards. I mean, loads of them were just with other entrepreneurs who just wanted to talk with me and ended up kind of being someone who they felt safe to go like, it's all falling apart. I don't know what to do, And I think it just turned out for those people that they just did need to say that. And it turned out it was fine, right? And they could carry on. But one of them was a call from this guy from a brand called Slow Fashion, who's Christian Hansen, who I didn't really realize it at the time. He sent me the website and I had a quick look and it looked really interesting. And I knew it was a startup. And, so I thought very early stages, website, cool, was going to have kind of a bit of a chat and maybe a bit of advice. Anyway, we had a kind of Google Meets call on the Monday. It was about half an hour and we got up like a house on fire. Then he said, look, I'm just about to fly to Las Vegas to the CES conference. Would you like to come and meet the team out there? And so I was kind of blown away by this. It's like obviously not just a startup. Didn't have a huge amount of information, obviously. And I admit one of the first kind of little red flags at the back of my head was, is this guy for real? So in the end, after a couple of hours and kind of sussing it out and having a look at a few things and a bit of a deep dive on some more information that he sent through, I moved my entire week around. And on Wednesday, I was on a plane to Las Vegas. And it is amazing to think that came off the back of a LinkedIn post that, I think Christian described it as rock and roll, which is kind of the vibe, actually. I do think that people respected the raw reality and there was no I didn't want to kind of wash it down with any like motivational stuff. It was just the raw reality of how brutal my experience of failing at something I was so emotionally married to working and being my whole life after a relatively short period of time in that context. And then to have people kind of respond so well to that, actually, not only was it a confirmation that people give, like we were talking about earlier, people actually care a lot less than we think that they do. And even further, if you go out there and really wear it like armor and the new equipment and tools that you have from having had a horrendous experience of failure like that, people fucking respect you for it. They really do. Not only do they respect you for it, they have a huge amount of desire for your knowledge and your experience. And that was obviously the most extreme one. Someone decided that was at least worth the cost of a flight and a hotel room for about a week at the drop of a hat, and now potentially a co-founder position at that company, along with some equity, potentially. So that's exciting. All of this basically off the back of the respect from one founder to an ex-founder, knowing that how difficult it can be, and knowing that even if you do fail, what you get from that is invaluable. Like the knowledge and the experience that you get from that is invaluable. So I think before I did that post, I think this is maybe, to my mind, the most important realization that came out of being that vulnerable, and also in that way, not trying to just dress it up, was beforehand, I'd been thinking about going and getting a job, and I had been very much in this mind frame, which I used to be in, of, some people can and some people can't. And I'm sort of somewhere in the middle where I know I'm good at some stuff, but I'm not one of those people. And I think a lot of other people, even though they might describe it in a different way, think in those terms as well. Like job interviews, that kind of thing. And it was pretty grindy stuff. It was quite depressing as well. It wasn't going to kind of lift me up anytime soon, certainly. To then suddenly being awash off the back of that post with all of these hyper energetic, creative people who are going like, yeah, the stats say I'm going to fail, but I still want to give it a go. And those are the people that ultimately eventually succeed. So having all of those people go, not only we respect you, but also we want you, suddenly kind of woke me up again going, oh, no, what? I am one of those people, right? I'm not somewhere in the middle. Okay, I'll just work and just stay safe because I've proven to myself that I'm not a responsible enough person to be a founder. Actually, it's not. Well, it's not about looking at responsibility in terms of don't take risks, which I think in this country is a big problem. So many people do think of responsibility in those terms. Responsibility is about owning your failures, right, and using them. So that's been the biggest one.
No, that's so true. I mean, I'm still waiting for that LinkedIn post that does that for me.
Yeah.
I'm still waiting for the invite to America. Come and talk to our people in America. We'll pay for you to come over.
Yeah.
But hey, I've got a couple of American listeners, so
For sure. There you go.
I've put it out there. But I think LinkedIn is such a powerful thing. I mean, think about all social media, and your post was different. But you get very little feedback.
Yeah.
It's a bit like doing the podcast. Right. I get very little feedback. I keep doing them because I enjoy doing them.
Yeah.
People don't tend to go, yeah, really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
But I do come across the odd person. So I get the odd person books in for a chat about their business. And they go, I've listened to all your podcasts. Well, this is what, 20, this will be 27. So there's quite a bit of listening.
Yeah.
Really gel with what you're saying. I need to work with you, and that's not what the podcast is about either. Yeah. It's about helping people that have gone through what I went through and kind of making them realize that, yes, you're going to fail, get off the ground, pick yourself up and go again.
Yeah.
Because you'll always regret it if you don't. And the only difference between failure, and I've said this a lot, and success is how many times you pick yourself up. If you pick yourselves up one more time than you fall over, you'll be a success.
Have you ever read The Alchemist?
Yes.
Yeah. It's one of my absolute favorite books. I'll read it like probably once every 3 months, to be honest, at least.
Yeah.
And I love the bit, I think it's somewhere at the beginning of that book, where the guy's talking to the boy and explaining how it sort of whether you want to describe it as fate or your personal legend. Pursuing your personal legend is how they put it in The Alchemist. The idea of actually, everyone in this world has an instrumental role to play, and there are those that know it and pursue it, and there are those that choose to just kind of let it fall into the background and just go about life. And in pursuing it, it's always at the very last moment, just when you're about to give up, when you've been tested and tested and tested and tested and tested, and you failed and you failed and you failed and you failed and you failed, obviously having kind of gotten a little further every time. And he tells the story of a gem prospector who's looking for diamonds and emeralds. And he's been going for years and years and years. And just at the moment where he's about to give up, he grabs a stone out of the stream that he's prospecting in and chucks it on the floor in frustration, and that hits another stone that cracks open, and it's the most beautiful emerald in the world. And I think that really is how things work. There are so many sayings, like we say, for example, the darkest moment of the night just before the dawn, right? It's exactly the same thing. It does very much, in my experience, work like that. The difficult part is that the longer life goes on, the more you fail, the darker that middle of the night moment becomes, because you sort of take more, and so you take greater risks that have greater stakes. But ultimately it does work out. And I think what I was saying earlier about not having been seen myself as a spiritual person in any way, I think I still wouldn't describe it as spiritual, but that has the experience of that happening independent of anything that I'm actually doing has been an interesting insight into there is something that meets you halfway, especially when you back yourself and take risks. Very, very much so. And then you get tested and tested and tested and tested and tested,
Absolutely. I might have said this on a podcast before, and unfortunately with doing loads of podcasts, you tend to repeat yourself. But to me, it's like a dam. You can't see what's in the dam.
Yeah.
So you can't see over it,
yeah.
right? But you're filling it up. You're chucking buckets of water over it. You're putting hose pipes into it. You keep doing it and you do it consistently. And so many people give up when it's just an inch from the top and all this leads and good stuff is going to flow over the top.
Yeah.
Because they can't see what they're doing. They can't see the consistency is working. So I often come across people who try to use LinkedIn, say, for leads. They do it for 2 weeks. Well, that's no good. I didn't get any leads.
Exactly.
It takes 6 to 9 months to kind of be noticed on LinkedIn and for people to start kind of following you and thinking about what you're doing. It takes a long time and doing the right stuff. So it's really important that you carry on being consistent and you carry on going and, you just carry on going. So, that's important. So going back to your business failure.
Yeah.
I mean, one thing about failures is generally companies will go very slowly if it's just a profit thing. So if they're not making a profit, they tend to die very, very slowly. It can take months or years.
Yeah.
If they run out of cash, it can take days.
Yeah.
So, often people just do not kind of understand that. And they understand, and they play around with cash thinking, well, I'll do this and take risk around the cash they use, not realizing if they run out of cash, that's it.
Yeah, that's literally it. You can't do anything.
No, and you get completely stuck. It just takes one person to take action and you've had it. So what have you learned? What's the kind of big learning from your journey?
Yeah, I mean, I had to say, just on that point, that's certainly a massive learning. It was something that I was very aware of because of my financial background, was cash flow, and especially at the early stages of the business, cash flow being everything. And the difference between the theory of, I had an all singing, all dancing, beautifully planned out sort of cash flow projection and plan. But it only takes one slightly too expensive, unplanned, sort of very, very interesting sounding agency agreement. Someone comes along and says, we can do exactly what you want us to do right now. And you believe them, God forbid. And then you spend that over the course of the next 3 months, you spend that £5,000 or £10,000, whatever it is, and suddenly realize, oh, fuck. Sure, it's making the seductive bit is it's not a complete failure, not at all. It's actually performing at average, but now that at average performance is completely annihilating a bunch of cash that we thought we'd have. And then enough of those mistakes to completely annihilate the whole thing. It was very, very tricky.
Shiny thing syndrome, I call it. And I've been through it myself. So I've gone from building to coaching. So coaching is completely different sales and everything else. And like you, most probably, I get approached by 3 or 4 times a week by someone who has got the golden bullet.
Yeah.
20 new clients guaranteed.
Yeah.
No problem and all this kind of stuff. Oh, I've been called out a few times. And I think, and why a few times? Well, I keep believing it. Yeah. And about 6 7 months ago, I went, right, that's it. I'm going to go my own path.
Yeah.
And I've done that and things have got a lot better because being consistent, looking at what the market says, using lead magnets. Everyone uses lead magnets. It's boring, do something that's real.
Yeah.
So I just thought that people are fed up with webinars and lead magnets and funnels and all this kind of stuff. So why not do something that's real? So I've started doing networking.
Yeah.
So I've had network groups and people love it. They get to see people in person. It does them the world of good. They get to do business, and on the back of that, I get to know people.
Yeah.
And it's been a bit of a game changer. So it's really, really interesting because you can kind of just take a different approach. And that's something that I came up with. I will no longer go to people who said, we'll build you a landing page. I mean, I was very naive. I used to think that build a website and they will come. Oh, no, it didn't work. Okay, I need a Facebook page. Then they'll come. Then an Instagram page. Oh, well, let's do some messaging on LinkedIn. Yeah, that'll definitely get everyone coming. And none of that works. Everyone's doing it. It's so busy and noisy out there. Unless you're telling a different story, unless you're doing something, unless you're not saying, look, I want to make a profit out of this. So the networking, I make no money out of it at all. It's just about giving back to the industry. And there is a positive upside to me because I can meet people that might want some help.
Yeah.
But we make no profit out of it. And we're going to roll it out and do different towns around the country so that people in the construction industry can speak to other people in the construction industry. And if they want to, don't have to, they can speak to me because I'll be there.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's just a different approach. And I think that works. But everything else is kind of old hat. And you must find the same thing with, the drinks industry where everyone's doing the same thing. So let's get a celeb to endorse our product. It does work, by the way. But you've got to get the right celeb and you've got to pay the money.
Right, exactly. And I've tried, on Mate, Yerba Mate, which was my kind of raw ingredient, and footballers specifically because of all of the South American footballers in the Premier League was always a huge one. And so trying to approach Premier League footballers was bloody impossible because unless you can sneak a few home addresses from somewhere, somehow, and just keep sending them your product until they get so annoyed that they look up who you actually are and get in touch, which I have heard working. Then you have to go through their agents. And then you're looking at, okay, can you give us some equity? Can you pay us like £10,000 for a 15-second post? Can you do this? The trouble is that they just got too much money for any of it to be worth their while, unless you can really just get lucky and have the product that for some reason they're completely in love with. Yeah, it was one of the things that I also found extremely hard and fell into the trap of thinking that, for example, all the social media pages, I'll just put some stuff out on social media. And I mean, the entire population of the universe is on the internet, right? So it's going to make loads of money easily and everyone will come, just like you were saying. That was very much, I'm not someone who'd ever used social media. I actually learned how to use Instagram. I felt like my grandfather because I had to watch all these YouTube videos about how to use Instagram when I started my business. Never been that into it. And then realized after a very long time of spending so much of my time every day doing new posts and writing comments and liking and responding to every single comment that I got. And, it just didn't work for me. I then ended up making the mistake of trying to find other people to pay to do it for me because I acknowledged that I didn't get it. And that came with another slew of problems. But the most valuable thing, no doubt, and I think the only thing that I will ever trust in future, and I'm kind of very much using this lesson now, is just personal network, which comes down to really face-to-face, ideally. But, personal network, even a phone call is enough to have like established a link with a person that I could pick up the phone to them again and they wouldn't be shocked or surprised to hear from me, particularly, maybe we can help each other out, that sort of thing. Now I'm kind of even to the point where any agency that I'm thinking about working with, if they haven't worked with someone that I know, I'm not going to speak to them. They might be the best agency in the world, and I'm more than happy to miss out on that opportunity if I haven't had confirmation from someone that I know that they've worked with them before and they were good at the very least, if not great. Yeah, that's been very much, because otherwise what you risk is just doing the same thing as everyone else, just like you were saying.
Yeah, I think networking is the way forward. So whatever you do, network. Yeah. Because meeting people, it's not about, and how you go about networking is really important. So if you start the conversation is, who can I introduce you to help you?
Yeah.
You end up being introduced to people that will help you.
Exactly.
So it kind of is a payback thing. If you go out and go like, yeah, it's all about me. I'll tell you what I do. I'm going to sell myself. That's not how networking works. So I'm a huge believer. One of my core values is win-win.
Yeah.
So it's got to be a win-win. People have to go out there. They've got a network. They've got to look at things they can help other people with, and it will come back.
Yeah.
I've got a couple of clients who are brilliant at it. All they do is introduce. And they're very busy themselves because they get reintroduced. So it's a really, really good approach. And there's so many brilliant people out there that will help you. And they won't want anything for it. They will just help you.
Exactly.
And it can be one idea that, they've got that you grab, and it makes it all worth it. So I always ask at the end of a podcast, what are the 3 things, you only get 3, that you would do differently, or the advice you'd give to people to change 3 things or do 3 things that you learned from the experience?
Yeah. I think the first one is about people, and it's not thinking about networking in this particular case, but just all of the people that surround you in life ever. Is if you are already starting a business or thinking about it, surround yourself with anyone who feels like that same creative energy, which is really, I think, what it comes down to. That's what you need around you. And I think so often people like me, when I was starting, are actually surrounded by the woe betide thee if you fail people, right? And I think it's just a part of the course of what happens. And then you start having these other fascinating people come into your life because you start thinking about doing your own thing, and you start having different conversations, and they lead to very interesting conversations with very interesting people. Pack your life full of those people. I didn't for much longer than I should have done. I was kind of a bit too, I don't know what it was actually, but I didn't really engage as much as I should have done as early as I should have done with those good people. That was a huge one. So that's number one. Number two, I think is about the spending money, and literally be a total Nazi with yourself about spending, especially if, like me, you are someone who is not in your personal finances in the past, has not been particularly good about saving money and putting things aside and, drawing hard lines. I know I'm not the only one. So if, like me, you are like that, then I will say it's okay. There's nothing wrong with you. It's that same source of weakness is actually a source of great strength for me as well. It's the enthusiasm and the want to kind of go out and keep doing things and keep making stuff and keep engaging with other people and other companies and other businesses. But you just need, if not yourself, then somebody else who you kind of devolve all that responsibility to. I know that from talking to a lot of founders as well over the course of the last month or so, that the way that they deal with that problem, because I've met a lot of other people like me, is by getting a CFO or a COO type personality who comes in and they just trust that with them. So every time they come and have the most exciting call of all time, oh my God, I've met this agency who can literally do everything that we dreamed of doing. They're going to be in on the call and they're going to go, okay, yeah, great. I love that they can do that, but we've only got this much money, right? So what do you want to do, this or this? And I'll stop you from going like, I'll do both, because you can't, right? I think that's definitely number two for me, is just that kind of nitty gritty cash flow and spending management, especially as a solo founder. And the third one is definitely to, if you are in the midst of failure, to feel it, to feel all of it, and to not try and be okay. Allow yourself to go right down into the depths of it, because no matter how much you fight it, you're going to get there eventually. And the sooner the better, because you have to hit that deepest level of existential terror. And it's all actually part of what's going to give you that strength when you come out of it, is knowing that you were there and that you got out, and you will get out as well. So, yeah.
Brilliant, Ralph. Well, thank you ever so much for that. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Robin.
It's been a really interesting chat, and that's great.
Brilliant. Thanks very much. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to Bust and Beyond with Robin Hayhurst. Be sure to tune in next time and visit his website at robinhayhurst.com.